So we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. The facilitator tonight is uh, Commissioner David Jones, former commissioner for Lehigh County. He has had the most experience as being a commissioner. Dave, you became the commissioner, I think, in 2007,
Yep.
eight, long time ago. And no one knows the Democratic Party and also negotiating as a commissioner better than David Jones does. He's got a good understanding of exactly what it takes to get the Democratic Party to actually win. Dave is one of the few people that was able to basically work with Republicans to get things passed and get things done in Lehigh County. A perfect example of that is that when he worked with Lehigh County and on the commissioner board, he taught them that the board is really in power, not necessarily the county executive, based on looking at the technology and looking at the most important things for really understanding the way the game is played. So David Jones was able to work with, I think he had 7-2 at one particular point, Dave.
Seven crazy Tea Party Republicans, two Democrats, and we were able to consolidate a coalition of board members because what you were alluding to in terms of taking a look at what the administrative code and the charter articulates and defines as the scope of decision making and authority within the governmental structure, and then empowering people to understand where the power in county government actually lies, and then how do we coalesce around that to actually get things done versus spending all your time fighting about stuff that doesn't matter for the people.
Great. So Dave, can you take it from here? And we can start. Seems like we got 29 people in attendance and participating, and we just start because we want to make sure that we start on time and make it a little longer than we anticipate. But let's just start. Okay.
All right. Well, welcome again. I'm honored to be amongst such prestigious panelists, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. And I'm going to encourage you as you give your input. We all have passion and energy around these topics. I'm going to encourage you to be as succinct and precise in your responses as possible. We've got a wide panel, and not everyone is going to be able to speak into every single question and issue. And it'll be my daunting responsibility to facilitate open dialogue, but yet at the same time be able to rein us in at the appropriate time. So I ask for your grace and indulgence in advance. So, Black folk involved in county government. Here's our first segment one. Our first set of questions has to do with participating in county Democratic Party. We want to be able to understand and assess the level of Black participation in the Democratic Party across the county. So here's my opening question. It is this: how inclusive do you feel the county Democratic Party is in terms of Black participation, and what efforts are being made to encourage involvement? How inclusive is it for Black folk, and what's being done to help to encourage folks to get engaged? I open it up to the panel.
Well, I'll start. As Michael said, I am chair of the Dauphin County Democrats. I'm actually the only elected Black chair in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm also the South Central PA Regional Caucus chair for the state Democratic Party. I'm the first Black woman to be elected a regional chair of the state party, and I'm currently the only person of color, so not just Black, but the only person of color that is a regional director for the Black Party. So the fact that I'm one out of 67 counties, I think says enough about the inclusiveness of the party. I think the Democrat Party is great with the rhetoric of inclusiveness, but we need more action, not just with party leaders, but even with candidates. I had a meeting last night with my executive board because of people of color candidates feeling as they're being treated differently. I have races where when we have a white candidate, particularly a white male candidate, millions of monies given in. We had actually a Hispanic woman run for Congress just in 2022, not a dime, hardly any phone calls. So again, the actions of the party need to start matching the rhetoric more. And I'm tired of being the only one.
It can be lonely at times. I can identify. Other input. Inclusiveness of the county parties, and what are the efforts that are being made? We've come to understand there's a lot of rhetoric, very little action. We were given specific examples in terms of no funding and support for key people of color and races.
If I might comment?
Please.
This is OC, Oliver Kennedy, membership director with the Montgomery County Democratic Black Caucus. And I just want to comment on the metrics and measurement. This panel discussion is entitled "The Black Experience: We Vote, but Do We Count Challenges?" I just want to put out there that unless we are tracking and measuring Black involvement, we'll never get to the point where we have where we are where we want to be in terms of inclusivity, diversity, equity. It just won't happen because we're not tracking it. Yes, I understand there's one here, there's one there. We're making progress. All of those things are much too vague. We need to know how many candidates we have. We need to know how many of us are in office in every position across the state. We need to set goals for ourselves. And the question would be that I'd like to put out there, what are the numbers now? And what efforts are we making to gather that data? So I'm just going to throw that out there as part of this discussion. I have some information on what we're doing in Montgomery County, but I'd like to get some feedback from the panel on what I just said.
So the question is, what is the level of participation that we're tracking from a candidate standpoint? And are you also referencing a voter turnout standpoint as well?
Actually, I'm talking about measurement of all areas. How many voters do we have? I can tell you, just to give you an example, in Montgomery County over the last decade, the number of Black voters has doubled from roughly, it's doubled in terms of actual numbers of voters, and it's more than doubled in terms of the percentage of Blacks that are voting in the elections. That's the information that we need to know.
Can I ask? Can I follow up on that, because that leads to one of our questions. What specific strategies can you identify and link to that increased voter turnout and engagement?
That's a question that needs to be answered. Are there any strategies involved? Or
what have you guys?
Does it just have to do with with demographics, with the fact that Blacks are moving out into the suburbs, they're moving out into Montgomery County. I'm not certain that there is any strategy involved as far as the number of voters are concerned. I can tell you that there's been a tremendous increase in growth in my community, which is Limerick, Pennsylvania. but there needs to be a strategy. And that's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
We need to have a strategy that engages. We need to know where our people are, who they are. We need to know that in order to engage them, in order to get them involved in the process. For those that are in the process, to get them more engaged, to run for office, all of those things. So again, I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure.
Because I think it's very important. What we measure, what we count, is what's important. And when we don't keep track of stuff, it sends a message that it's not important. If you think something's important, then you keep track of it. If you don't really care about it, then you don't.
Let me ask some of the other panelists from other parts of the counties. Are there any specific things that you guys are doing? Any best practices? And certainly, Mike, from the statewide Black Caucus perspective, what are some of the things that you guys have begun to implement under your new leadership?
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Denise Rose, and I am in Philadelphia County. I am the vice chair of the Black Caucus and formerly the secretary of the Black Caucus. Speaking to what OC said, many of the Black population in Philadelphia who were a part of the major voting bloc have decided to leave the city and go out to the counties. And so I think that the fact that the demographics are shifting due to gentrification here in the city is a very, very important fact. We know that the numbers here in Philadelphia have gone down in my conversations with our commissioner. However, I don't have exact numbers, but noting that the number of Black voters and participation is decreasing in the city at an alarming rate is very important to recognize that as our numbers decrease, the numbers in the county are increasing. And so I think just by sheer numbers, as well as looking at, as OC said, what is important to voters, what are the numbers, how do we keep track of that, and who would be responsible for maintaining I guess a bank of sorts of, where the Black folks are going, maybe why they left, once they leave, where are they voting. I had the opportunity last summer to do surveys with young Black men in terms of their voting preferences. And the sad reality is many of them are very disenchanted with the current policies and the direction in which the Democratic Party is going. And some have chosen to jump ship and go to the Republican Party, while others have indicated that they are simply not voting because being the lesser of the two evils is simply not good enough for them. And so I believe that the Democratic Party is not doing a good job with messaging, but not only not doing a good job with messaging, they're not doing a good job with having a message worthy enough for many of the young people who are not party loyalists to stand up, pay attention to, and become active participants in the process.
That's great. That's great feedback. What I'd like to do, because that's the broad national party, that's the broad national strategy of engagement. What we want to try to focus on are the things that we can have more influence on, and that's at the local county level. And so what are some of the things that we can do from a county engagement perspective that would help to more educate, help to alleviate some concerns, and increase more engagement?
I would like to speak to this. Hello, everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Montgomery County, and all credit goes to my team, OC, and and Corinne and Don Lyons and even Eddie, we started out with a mission in mind to identify, number one, identify the Black voters in Montgomery County. And then we took it further to ask for a code. So when committee people and all of us are canvassing, that we're able to identify the voters. I think the first step is to find out who they are, where they are, and then we can begin to have the discussions about the disenfranchisement. We can have discussions about them actually being heard and addressing some of the issues at the county level of what our Black people are feeling, hearing, and thinking. People are not going to be engaged if they feel like you don't hear them. They may vote and they may not vote, depending on who's running. The disenfranchisement is it's not overt, it's covert. Um, um, Discrimination that is imposed on our Black electeds, as well as our candidates that want to run and look for the support from the party. You know, it's a hard truth that we have to face, but we really need to look at it in the face, gather the data. We fought for a long time just to be able to get an identification code to identify Black voters. And the biggest problem, surprisingly, wasn't as much as our white counterparts as it was our own people. So education is important, but we have to be able to find the people, identify them, and then begin to have real, honest dialogue with them and look for resolutions.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback. So we've talked about what participation looks like, challenges with participation. We've talked about the necessity, and thank you so much for that feedback of Mrs. Fields in terms of specificity around activities to track and to engage. We've identified some challenges, and that's what I'd like to focus our next set of questions around is what are some of the challenges? We've kind of alluded to them like skipping a rock across the water in the first question, but what are some of the specific challenges that Black folk face within the Democratic Party?
I'm gonna just jump in here on that one.
Just jump on in.
Okay, thanks. I think one of the challenges that is faced, especially within the community I'm in Lancaster County, is one of the big issues. I think that I live in a most marginalized, disenfranchised area, part of the city. And what we find is that our politicians here, our elected officials, are very good at talking. That's what a politician does, but their actions never match those words. And that's where then there comes in this distrust of then not wanting to vote, not wanting to engage, because you just keep talking and you only come around when you want our vote. And then once we give you our vote, then what you promised never comes to fruition. So that's a big problem in my area. And even, to get candidates of color is problematic because of the way our county party has treated people of color. We have the secretary who is of the state party, the correspondence secretary. She has ran at least 3 times. She is our electorate for Pennsylvania. I mean, she has gotten endorsements, but our local party has never endorsed her. But yet the people keep electing her because she does her job. But yet as a county, they do not feel like they feel their superiority, and they put their personal feelings into these situations where it's supposed to be the best interest of the people. And obviously she does the job of the people because the people keep electing her, versus the fact that the county is not even endorsing her, but she keeps winning. So again, we come forth as candidates of color, but yet we get this resistance from our own county party that, you know, these barriers are hard. I ran for city council recently, and I ran into these exact barriers. I just wanted to represent my part of the city that is not represented on council. We're all at large. They wanted a white candidate on the north side, which we don't need on council, versus them supporting the 3 Black candidates that ran on my side of the city, which is primarily black and brown. So this is the things that we're up against when we're even candidates, as well as residents then who see this strife within our local party. And so they're not going to want to come support people who are not going to support them.
So
Can I just say too, real quick,
Please.
as you know, as we need to leverage our power more, as Black people, because if we're honest, there would be no Democrat Party without us. We are the most loyal
right.
voting group of the Democrat Party, especially Black women. So we need to stop just accepting to what's given to us and just vote blindly because, as what was just said, we don't get the support. Another issue is, in some ways, in this way, we're not different from the Republican Party in the sense that there's always the chosen ones. You know, the party, the powers that be like to pick and choose their candidates. And let's be honest, they usually don't look like us.
That's right.
They just don't. And when the party chooses, I myself have been called and asked not to run for an office for their chosen ones. And again, it's never anyone that looks like me. And when they have their chosen ones, those are the people that gets all the money. Then we get into petition challenges.
Yep.
People are half scared to support you because they're threatened, particularly if they have state or political type jobs. You can even be threatened. You know, you don't want to ruin your political future. You know, we'll support you for something else, meaning what they think we should have. So I think we need to leverage our power more as a voting bloc, because again, you know, you can't always expect us to save everyone from the Donald Trumps of the world. In my case, Scott Perry, who is basically a congressional Trump. But then when it's time for us to run, then all of a sudden it's not your turn.
So I think for me, I'm Denise Moffin. I'm from Lycoming County. I ran for county commissioner last year, and I was considered a transplant to Williamsport because I was not born and raised here. I'm a Southerner, born and raised in Mississippi. My husband and I are military, and I was always asked by Black people, was I influx? Did I come from Philly? Because Williamsport has the name of a recovery city. You know, they bust people down from Philly and Pittsburgh when Jesse Bloom was mayor, and all people thought that they saw were Black people. And so if you were not from here, you must be an influx. And when I had to tell them, no, I'm new here because for the past 10 years, I was serving my country. I'm a veteran. I was deployed, you know, all over. I'm a military spouse. The resistance that I received from fellow Democrats in my county party hurt me more than the loss, because these were people I worked on campaigns with, people I went and collected signatures with. You know, I worked with them for 3 years. And the moment the default white man decided he was going to run, they jumped ship, because I was not, like I told Michael, I wasn't the stereotype for Black women. I'm young. My husband and I are married. We have 2 kids. You know, we have a background that is uncommon, I think, for Black people. I was questioned if I had a college degree. Did I have the money to even run? But my white counterpart wasn't asked the same thing. His bank account wasn't, you know, questioned. And I said, I have 2 degrees working on my 3rd. My husband's a civil engineer who's a captain in the military. Like, when I started to roll off my accomplishments, it still wasn't good enough. So I think as a Black person, our biggest resistance not only comes from other Black people, but Democrats, you know, in general, because we have a perception of what the Black vote is and what Black people are supposed to be. And when you don't fit that narrative, you're an outcast. So my discourse in this county was tenfold. I wasn't from here. I didn't sound the way they sounded. They, looked at me as not part of the norm. So it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. It really was.
Let me ask this question, because we've identified some very, very real challenges and barriers, structural, systemic, racial bias undergirding it, regional bias undergirding it. When I first got elected into office, I was the first not just Black person of color to serve on the county board of commissioners. And Mike Laws and I, when we were going out and we were knocking on doors to get our petition signed, we got dogs sucked on us. We got doors slammed in our face. So those things are a reality. What I would ask as the last part of this question is twofold. Because one, what do you say is the impact of having representation as communities of color from a policymaking standpoint, and what are the detriments of not having that representation from a policymaking standpoint, particularly on the local level? Because what happens on the local level impacts our lives every day. What happens in Washington doesn't impact our lives every day. Doesn't impact economic development in our region, doesn't impact what happens in our schools, doesn't impact what happens with our local judicial systems. That's all on the local level. So I'm interested in hearing quickly some of the implications of the lack of representation from a policy standpoint.
Well, from a policy standpoint, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ed Graham. I was the first African-American to be elected to the Springfield Township Board of Commissioners, also the first African-American to serve as the president of said board. One of the issues is the detriment that is occurring is why this group is even meeting here tonight. One of the detriments that I've opposed, and the same thing that Mr. Jones said, was that as I was campaigning, I had the police called on me as I was knocking on doors. There's a Black man knocking on doors, going door to door. We don't know why. The second, and I think is the most relevant part, is that the Democratic Party, at least in my estimation, in my opinion here in Montgomery County, is that the Democratic Party has become more of moderate Republicans, more so than than liberals, and addressing the needs of all of its citizenry. Equity, equality, equity, diversities, these are all catchphrases that elected official uses in order to get our attention. But as addressing policies that are needed for the changes to address that and make that's non-existent. And you will always get the white Democratic members to agree with you wholeheartedly when they're talking to you one-on-one. They will never, at least I have never observed them saying that publicly and addressing the needs of what is needed within our communities to make us successful. And one of the things that is really prevalent here in Montgomery County are numbers. I believe, and I had those stats in front of me, that Montgomery County is 79.5% white. African-American population, the African-American population is the 17 point something. I don't know the exact things. So what you have is that you have a strong voice that is telling you what the needs of our communities are, but they are ignored. But on the other hand, you have Black candidates that want to run for these offices because they know they cannot alienate themselves from that voter, from that 79.5% population. They come and what I call They are like slaves going to the big porch in order to call us all around to give a narrative. So I get angry about that. And as a matter of fact, even as a commissioner, I was sent emails with the term Sambo in it. I was called out in a public forum as the commissioner who brings color to this board. And when I wrote, and I think Ms. Fields can attest to this, I was outraged.
Yep.
I sent out letters to those supposed Black representatives, state senators, senators, congressmen. Not one replied in with an email to say that this cannot be tolerated. Therein lies the issue that I think is the crux of why we're even meeting this evening.
Good evening. I just want to piggyback off of Eddie. My name is Corinne Landauer. I am the co-director of the Montgomery County chapter, Democratic Black Caucus. One of the implications of us not being in these rooms is we've had township commissioners in the past, despite understanding the issues with housing and affordable housing and access to affordable housing. We've had township commissioners in our local municipalities run on the concept of less development, which means that affordable housing and access to affordable housing, right, would not come into those municipalities because those township commissioners are running on, we don't want that in our areas and in our neighborhoods. So when we don't have people that can bring the clarity to the conversation and bring a different perspective to that conversation, we have what we have now, the same old, which is the lack of access to, for example, affordable housing. So
here's my question. I'm going to pose this succinctly, and the responses will be the last one before we move on to our next segment. This has been really, really engaging, and there's a lot of passion that's in the experiences that are being shared. With all that we have all experienced in our party, I think most of us still believe, as faulty as the Democratic Party is, in a two-party system, it is the best option that's available for us. Or at least I believe that. I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but I'm assuming since you're all engaged in the party, you believe that as well. What can be done? What's the catalyst for beginning to move the needle so that there is more engagement, there's more support, we can get over some of, let's just call it what it is, some of just the outright internalized marginalization and racism that exists within our party?
Yeah, Michael Keys here.
Please.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working on with Michael Laws in the Black Caucus is that we are have put me in as an area director for the Black Caucus because I'm here in Northwest Pennsylvania. I'm former city council person in the city of Erie, and I'm the first elected state committee member in my county and the only person of color in our entire Northwest Caucus. And so one of the things that we're working on is to connecting these community of colors. You know, once you get outside of your two major cities, we have a disenfranchised, you could say, with the community of colors. And so I think that that's something that can be done. Like I mentioned earlier this week to my colleagues, was like getting the caller counties to getting them together, for as like a regional caucus, Black Caucus, start
fellowshipping with them so that these things cannot be hidden in silos. And, there's a large group of African Americans that, are in that area. And I think that that's the way to do it, is to try and collect the communities of colors and connect them so that we can start speaking, with one voice on certain things, and definitely with, synchronize ourselves.
Gotcha.
May I just add to what Michael said?
Please.
Mike, that takes us right back to what I originally was talking about in terms of we need to, and what Linda mentioned, we need to identify where we are, Black folks in our communities, because we're out there. We need to know where we are, who we are, so that we can do what you just said, work together as a community. Before we move on, though, to address what you said, David, in terms of what some of the barriers are and what the impact is in terms of policy. One of the things we need to work on is where the democratic rules and bylaws prevent Black candidates from actually running. Mm-hmm. Those that are interested, that have stepped up, like the Nitra, our young folks, when they want to run, I heard it said several times that the preferred ones, we are not the preferred ones when it comes to running for office. So often the democratic rules and bylaws that fall under endorsements prevent us from being the chosen ones.
Can you provide
an example? You want an example?
Yeah, a specific example.
Denitra is an example. She just gave herself as an example. An example in Montgomery County most recently was a young man out of Pottstown that wanted to run for the Pennsylvania State Senate.
Emmanuel.
And he was running against a white woman, and the Democratic Party did not endorse him. And so therefore, the committee people, who are really the ones that have the power in the party, they're the ones that are out canvassing and talking to voters, they were not able to support him. And so the laws, the rules and the bylaws, when there are contested primaries where people who are not the chosen ones want to run, those rules should not be set up to exclude someone that wants to run, that is new, that's not the usual or the chosen candidate. And the voters should be allowed to make those decisions, not the Democratic Party.
Right.
And it's particularly vexing when those rules and bylaws prevent Black candidates from running, because we're the ones that vote overwhelmingly for Democrats.
And consistently.
They can count on us. And so they should be supporting more involvement from Black candidates, and in particular, young Black candidates. It kills me. It really kills me when someone like Denitra comes in and says, I stepped up, but these folks didn't support me. How could they not support her? That's all I got to say on that.
No, and I want to add to that, if I can add to that too, when we're talking about
before you add to that it's a great segue, because that's the next segment point we wanted to discuss, and that's the support for Black candidates across the Democratic Party in the counties. And so that's a very, very great example. And please,
Danae,
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry. Well, to add to that about, Black candidates, one of the reasons why I wasn't endorsed was because of this 2/3 majority. It allows people to play on the numbers then. So what they do was they didn't want me endorsed, so they found enough people that they knew was going to attend the convention, and they found enough people to not to say no against me, to not give me the endorsement, even though I had the majority vote. At the end of the day, I still had the majority, but I didn't get that 2/3 threshold, which kept me. And they play on that, and they use that, and they weaponize that. And that is one thing. And since everybody was stating their accolades, I was the first Black Latina to chair our city Democratic committee. And as chair, I saw this. And so when my term was up, I didn't want to run for it again. I ran for state committee because I wanted to see, like, okay, what happens at this level? You know what I mean? I wanted to understand. And somewhere we need to eliminate that barrier of that 2/3, because they use that against us so much. And it is a deterrent for people of color, and they use it against us the most.
Well, can I speak to this just for a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
The way they tally that 2/3 is skewed because they don't count the people that abstain. And that happened in Montgomery County, and it happened in Delaware County in this most recent convention, and their most recent conventions. And then they utilize the incumbents and the party to push through, even if it's a Democratic candidate. We're Democrats, period. That they force or push them to support the incumbent. And they may not necessarily want to, but they can't outrightly do it. Now, I ran the only Black woman to have run for the Senate in the 24th district, and then the only it was two Black women to run in the 17th district. The second time around, I was told to step out. Okay. It was so frustrating for me that I couldn't get my own Black counterparts, a woman coming from labor and who have represented the state and the county for 30 years. It's very seeing them give money to candidates where there wasn't an endorsement yet, but those white women were getting checks to their $5,000, I was getting $1,500 or $500. So these are the kinds of tactics that's used. I spoke out. I didn't cower back or down at that point. I decided that I was going to organize the Black voters by creating in Montgomery County a wing of the Black Caucus, of the state Black Caucus, and organize and find out who these Black people are, where they are, educate them so that we can have a unified voice. But my issue too, and I will speak to it because that's who I am, I call a spade a spade. Black folks need to stand up and support their own.
Yeah.
Period.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Amen. So yeah, y'all, I'm supposed to be the facilitator here. Y'all getting me all fired up. So all of these experiences that we've had in the party we love, the party we think that can best meet the needs of our community as opposed to the other party. What do you think, or what have you experienced in terms of the long-term impact of these challenges, both for candidates like yourselves and what you've experienced, and for those who are on the outside looking in?
I'd like to jump in on that.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in on that one. So can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a situation in Lehigh County. We had a situation where we had a person by the name of Rick Doherty, who was the chair. He reached out, got a lot of Black people involved, and really promoted to a point where a lot of people applied to become persons on a state committee. We had probably 11 people that applied to be on state committee. And then out of those 11 people, there was a person by the name of Courtney Robinson that didn't know these people, the guys he said he didn't know any of, and challenged all of them and challenged all their petitions. And as a result, most of the people that applied and were trying to get involved in the state committee refused to go down and to fight with lawyers, and they were insulted. And as a result, for a period of 8 years after that, Black people basically said, we don't want anything to do with the Democratic Party. Look what happens to us. And so these are the long-term effects that takes place when people do these tricks and do these things to Black folks. And people don't understand that, but these things are taking place all across the entire state. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of getting calls and emails and messages about certain people playing these tricks, dastardly tricks, and they're trying to invite Black people in, but they're playing these tricks. And the effect is, once you're explaining to folks, you're losing. They can care less. Our folks, our brothers and sisters can care less. They just see the Democrats as doing dirty tricks and they don't want to be involved. That affects our membership, that affects our voting, that affects our people. And it's gonna have to stop.
So what are some of the things that we can do to change the existing paradigm, to be able to provide more support for Black candidates? What can we do in terms of affecting change from an internal policy and rules standpoint? What are some of the options out there for us that can change the status quo?
So I think, because I was the only Black candidate I think that had ran for a position here in Lycoming County in a while. And I spoke out about it. I spoke out about my signs being turned around while the other Democratic candidate signs were still there. I spoke out about the passive aggressiveness that I received from other committee members in the local party here. Mike can tell you, I went toe to toe with those committee members at a meeting to let them know for 8 months I kept my cool. We have to want to be the change. It's easy to say, I'm sick of this and I'm tired of this, but what are we going to actually do about it? I'm only 33, so I'm the youngest one in my county party, but then I'm also the youngest, I was the youngest candidate. And I have let it be known I am not my ancestors. I'm not going to sit there and hold it. I am a very blunt, honest, in your face person, because respect is a big deal to me. Military training, that's what I thrive on. So if I'm I'm sorry.
No. Let me ask this. Let me ask and expand the question. Right? Yes. We have to be vocal. We've got to speak the truth. We have to confront. But then after those types of things, what mechanisms? How can we change the rules by which the game is played?
Get a seat at the table.
Okay.
If I may jump in.
Have a seat at the table.
Please jump in.
Okay, so I guess about 3 years ago, the Black Caucus introduced a resolution that began to address those types of issues, because I'm hearing different candidates or former candidates, various experiences. And living in Philadelphia, I was unaware of many of the smaller counties' lack of diversity and the things that those of my colleagues who wish to be elected officials had to suffer through. Like, this is sounding to me like Mississippi rather than Pennsylvania. And so as a former legislative director, I know that in order for legislation to be passed, there has to be a big push. When people would call the office with suggestions of, things that they would want to push through as a resolution, it was not just individual people. There were blocks and groups of people who, would write letters, show interest, and get the attention of the elected officials. And so it almost appears as if people are operating within a vacuum. This county is experiencing this, another county is experiencing something different, but they all are theoretically the same types of tactics and strategies that would prohibit candidates of color becoming elected officials. And so it appears to me that until we have galvanization and unification so that we're able to speak as one big voice rather than several smaller, isolated voices, we're not going to garner the type of attention or even power that's needed to bring about the changes that need to be made in order for more representation of Black and people of color within elected positions.
Thank
And
you.
I would also, and I would,
have
I
to
would
get rid of
also
the
add to that.
plantation.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I
No,
would also,
my apologies.
Ladies first.
Okay. I would also add to that possibly, as committee people, we're regulated. We're, I literally a couple weeks ago had a 4-hour hearing. Like literally, I had a hearing because of them trying to accuse me of breaking a bylaw. Okay. So they want to regulate us. Where is their regulation? Where is the state coming down and saying, are you, acting within the Democratic Party's interest? Are you doing this and that? Our leadership in the county is not conducive with being inclusive and being equitable. And all these things that we say that we are as a party, that's not what is happening here. You know what I'm saying? So there needs to be some type of regulation, some type of, policing on them as well as they police us as committee people.
Wow, my brain went five different directions. The Black Caucus is one of the tools that can be leveraged as that galvanizing catalyst to create a block, a movement. The one thing I learned in my time in government, spent 12 years in my time in government. And if you talk to anybody in the county of Lehigh, they will tell you I was probably one of the most successful county commissioners in Lehigh County. Why? Not because I was so smart. I understood that entities can only function by their rules. So once you begin to understand the rules and how to use their rules against them, or how to create the catalyst and the right process by which those rules can be changed or modified. And sometimes that's not a quick fix. That doesn't get fixed by November, doesn't get fixed by next year. But I think what Mrs. Rose was alluding to is we've got to come to the point where we become committed to some type of intentional galvanizing strategy that we try to work collectively versus fighting the battle in our own individual counties. Because for some of the counties that you guys are in, like I'm born and raised in Pennsylvania, born and raised in the Lehigh Valley. And I don't know some of you folks, but maybe you've heard this term about our beloved Commonwealth, is that Pennsylvania is northern Alabama. Much of Pennsylvania is northern Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Always has been.
Always has been.
Pennsylvania is what I was told.
Pennsylvania, that's a new one. That's a new one.
That was me.
So we have these inherent challenges, right? So the question becomes, how do we, following this conversation, what's the next conversation to where we can start putting a structured, systematic approach to try to resolve? I'm going to ask one more question.
Now, Dave, can I recognize somebody?
Absolutely.
We have
your show.
we have from the 198th, Dorisha Parker, who is the state rep, the honorable state rep in the 198th. Dorisha, can you jump in and say a few words of what your thoughts could be?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I can just say, and I can give it to you straight up. We just finished petitions. And listening to what you just said, David, we're 4 years too late because of what I'm hearing right now when we sign petitions. This was the most challenging time, not just for me, but for many of my colleagues. We had older and aging adults refusing to sign. We had African-American men that said the only person that cared about them was the man's name who was on a check, that was Donald Trump. We had men, Black men, tell me that the last time they voted was for Barack Obama. We had millennials saying that they only see some of us only because it's election time. So I'm hearing things and I'm kind of angry in a different manner because we have more factions now. It's not just about a Democrat, whether you're left or whether you're right. We also have other intentions as far as the independents that are out there. We have the working family parties that are out there. We have Democrats who work and align with the working family parties, but they don't want to be in a working family party. They're Democrats. So I'm just listening to this cycle, and I'm nervous more now than ever that it's February. I don't know what the hell the Democratic message is. I have no idea. I don't know what the hell that they're waiting for, because I'm more nervous that we have a gentleman who they could put how many figures that he has been charged with, but you got the African-American sister who is the attorney and they worried about who she slept with. So my biggest concern right now is being a state-seated incumbent state rep, that my name is going to be the bottom of everybody's ballot, but you got a known criminal who's going to be the top of the ticket. And none of us collectively can get his ass removed off of this year's ballot. That's why you hear the anger and the frustration. So you cannot motivate and get individuals involved in a process when we have seated elected officials who can't remove him. That's going to be the challenge. What do you say when you have somebody that's on the ballot right now and we couldn't do what we had to do to get him removed? It's a longer time for you to convince people in 2024 to vote. I'm telling you, it is not anything that I have seen, that I have witnessed in my life. It took me longer time, and this wasn't just with Black folks. It was with white folks. And I'll say this, and you're just mean me, but I don't bite my tongue. I know white women is going to actually vote to absolutely protect their privilege. Again, this time, I'm encouraging any Black person, do not be duped by these white women who's going to try to come and galvanize you to jump on, to partner with them in a coalition. They're going to use you because they're going to go ahead and vote for Trump. We cannot be duped. We don't need to be coming to their parties and boosting up their numbers for a damn photo op. We need to tell our people right now why this crazy man is on the ballot and how they always protect their white privilege and their supremacy. That is it. That's bottom line. That's how simple we gotta be. You can't sugarcoat it, and you can't use a hip hop celebrity because you got freaking now who was it lately? Oh, you got Meek Mills. Yeah. And then you got another one, Snoop Dogg. Now all of them are coming around saying, oh, Trump this and oh, Trump that. And now we're concerned that they're flip-flopping when a couple years ago he wasn't cool. Now they're saying he is. So I am more like baffled by why we have a white supremacist known who was a part of this insurrection, who is still not in jail, and he is on our ballot.
Because you got to get rid of the plantation mentality that we have. And I'll be the first to say that. Yep. That we, right now, I've been doing this with my dad since 1963, when my father helped lay the desegregation of Girard College. Between the Black community and what's happening then and what's happening now, we are slaves on a plantation. And what they'll do is whenever you want to get Black people on the plantation to help support Massa, he gets those famous Black popular fiddler that'll tap dance and play a fiddle on the porch, and then we'll all gather around and listen to him. It's time to get rid of a plantation mentality and stop disguising it with diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Come on now.
means absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
Until we start to teach, and I honestly believe that we're heading to the point where our generation is lost. And until we start teaching these revolutionary ideas, and remember, revolution doesn't mean anything but change. We have to start teaching this to our younger people so that when they want to run for office, we have to support them. And we have to get out those porch people. I was going to use something else. Thank God I caught myself in this field, so I didn't say it. But until we start getting rid of those that are tap dancing and fiddling on the porch and start actually teaching those revolutionary change ideas, we're going to be still doing the same thing as Ms. Parker aptly pointed
you
out.
gotta go younger, because I was just with the third, fourth, and fifth graders. The third, fourth, and fifth graders, Black kids, just asked me, "Do I know Donald Trump? Am I sitting down with Donald Trump? And if I'm a legislator, how come I couldn't get him in jail?" So I feel like for us, we gotta go lower.
Let me ask this question. Let me ask this question. Let me kind of bring it back in.
Thank you.
Because we're focusing on the county level and the county, because whatever national race it is, what is the context in which those national races are run on the ground? It's at the county levels.
Thank you. Now I can speak to that if I
Please
can.
Yes.
Exactly what I said at the very beginning. Get those off the porch. And we need to represent and educate and work with our own Black candidates. All of this stuff about, and we need to start at home. Clean up your damn house, and then you could talk about the national level. When we do what we're supposed to do locally, it spreads abroad, it spreads out. So we need to clean up our own house, Black people, and represent Black people, qualified Black people. I'm not talking about unqualified, but qualified Black people. And support them and put our money in their pockets, in their campaigns.
And Mrs. Fields, I'm going to say something a little bit out of my role as facilitator. There's an uncomfortable truth that you articulated, and that uncomfortable truth has to do with the quality of candidacy. Has a lot to do oftentimes with some of the challenges that we face, and that's uncomfortable for us to be able to say, but it's a fact.
It absolutely is.
Here's we're talking about people leaving the Democratic Party, not wanting to be engaged on the local level. What are some of the reasons that people are leaving? I'm gonna give you a quick experience of mine when I was running in office, and I knocked on the door at the bottom of Cumberland Street, and I knocked on the door. Young mother came to the door, and I said, "Hey, ma'am, I'm running for re-election as your county commissioner. I would love to have you sign my petition." And she boldly and strongly said, "I only vote in the national elections. I only vote national. I only vote for the presidency. I don't get involved local." I said, "Well, ma'am, if you give me 2 minutes, I'd like to explain to you why what happens on the local level is more important for you than what happens nationally." She picked up her phone. She put 2 minutes, and she said, "You got 2 minutes." I asked her 3 questions. I asked her if she had kids in the school district. She said, "Yeah." I said, "You know they're going to be laying off 200 teachers and taking away gym and music class?" I asked her if she owned her home. She said, "Yes." I said, "Do you know that your property taxes went up?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that happened by a decision made local, and they had just raised the water rates because the city had to lease out its water and sewer." And once I explained to her what happens on the local level and how what happens on the local level impacts the quality of her life every single day. And I think that's where the disconnect is. We can talk about the national Democratic Party and the national messaging, but we also have to have a message that's about the local.
That's right.
We have to teach
if I
How
civics.
can we
might
connect
add,
those dots? How can we connect those dots?
if I might comment on the local level and what are some of the challenges that we face or our volunteers face. I'll give you an example that just occurred at a recently with me. I was doing a presentation of the Montgomery County Black Voter Identification and Documentation Initiative, which is where we have committee people when they're out canvassing, when they come across a Black voter, they use an activist code to document that Black voter's record so we can later on go back and reach out to that individual. So I was doing this presentation, my last one, in fact, from Montgomery County, in a place called Red Hill, Pennsylvania. And I guess this is one of those areas that you're talking about in Pennsylvania.
I ran in that district. Yes, I know it very, very well.
Okay. Well, I guess you survived Red Hill. It's in the boonies, as they say. At this committee meeting, there were probably about 30 to 35 people, and two of them were Black. And after the meeting, one of the Black individuals reached out to me, interested in becoming a member of the Montgomery County Democratic Black Caucus. And so we got to talking, and I said, well, tell me about your, experiences there in Red Hill. And she said, well, I can tell you that canvassing is very difficult. Well, I said, well, why? What's the problem with camp? She said, well, when you're a Black person and you're knocking on doors in Red Hill, they don't really want to open the door for you. And, some of them can be really rude. And I said, well, why are you out there knocking on doors by yourself? One, you're a woman. Number two, this is a very racist area here. We know that. So there should always be someone out there with you. And she said, well, yeah, you're right. I agree. It would have been a much better experience if I had someone with me. So to make a long story short, I know we're supposed to be succinct. That's something that we need to consider, is what's happening with the Black volunteers that we do have. That's an example of one of the things that causes Black people to be discouraged when they're volunteering. Another one is when they want to volunteer to run for office, and the rules and bylaws that are in place are impediments to their running.
Yeah.
They're running into the endorsement process when it's a contested primary. That works against Black candidates, and we've heard that from several of the candidates here tonight.
Yep.
But if I can add to that real fast, I think a lot of that, and a lot of that has to do with the local and state and federal Black leadership. Because they want to hold on to their seat, they don't want to step on the toes of they don't want to step on the toes of Jim Crow. So what we need in order for Black people who have always galvanized around a strong Black voice, I don't see that any longer. And the Black voices that you do have out here, there are certain issues, such as what we're discussing here tonight, that they will run from. They will not discuss them, nor will they support them.
Yeah.
So how do we get those Black leaders that are in office right now to engage and help to get out the word of the discussion that we're having tonight? If you can do that, that would be a great start,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Michael Keys here. I think that, well, two things to go back to the last segment is that we're not, the bylaws are not the problem in my particular county. The particular county is whether it's, discrimination or racism or preferences, just that are being shown to candidates. I was the incumbent on city council, and I received a flyer. Hey, come meet the candidates, from our party, and I get the flyer, and they have somebody running for my seat on the flyer. And I'm, the sitting city council person, and I'm the former vice chair of this party. Just goes to show you what length it goes to undermine what you would think would be in our party's best interest. And number two, we're having the discussion in committee was, I think it's time for the Pennsylvania State Party to hire people specifically to liaison with the Black community. Maybe one in the East, one in the West. But if we don't find a way to synchronize our voices and to get let the party know what we're thinking and why people are on the streets are leaving, our parties are not voting, and they need to find a way to come to us in these communities and put us at ease and let us know that we are not just a part of our county party, but we are part of the larger state and national picture. So, I happen to live in the county, one more second, where, one of 6 counties that's being monitored for the presidential election nationwide, as the true Erie County being the true bellwether county. Okay.
So here's my question, right? So it comes down to this. We've got about 15 minutes left. Great input, great good energy. I want us to kind of leave. I'm also a pastor. So, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But when a desire is obtained, it is the wellspring of life. So I want to leave us with some hope. I believe that as dysfunctional as our Democratic Party is, and I can't remember who the Will Rogers once said, I'm not a member of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat. We have always been a dysfunctional party. We have always had our issues. We were the purveyors of Jim Crow at one time, but yet we put forth the first African-American president in a time when nobody thought that would ever happen. So what I want to put out to the group is, what can we do that is within the scope of our control? What can we impact in our individual footprints? How might we be able to collectively gather ourselves together to create a catalyst for some solutions and some strategies that are going to produce for us real inclusion?
Stop supporting all of these white candidates and start supporting our own, and that will send a very clear message. Money talks.
Yep.
And when
bullshit
you stop putting your money, your energy, your resources, and your time into these white campaigns and put it into Black campaigns. Primary example, we got one going on in Pennsylvania right now.
Yep.
Okay, we need to send a clear message. The women, the men, the young voters, every organization, we need to get behind our own, especially when they're qualified. But no, that doesn't happen. That's real talk. The other thing is that we have to educate our own household and then spread it abroad, create a venue like the PA Youth Votes that is working across Pennsylvania just to educate the kids about their rights as voters. Get
And
with the
also we gotta
kids.
put our money where our mouth is, Linda. I mean, and
Exactly.
I could say a full throttle that I get frustrated, especially when I see women, you rocking around with red bottoms, you got Yves Saint Laurent's, you got Louis Vuitton, you got Gucci, Tiffany's, you wearing like $6,000. How damn do you come give me a $50 check? I should cuss your ass out. That's
No, no, you know
No.
what? You
no,
better be
Linda, no,
glad you got that.
stop. I have to
Listen.
say it from a different perspective. Because right now we're talking about rising costs and we're talking about everything in a campaign cost. So the money that you paid and you paid somebody 4 to 5 years ago, you couldn't get anybody to put on a literature now. So what I'm saying to you, Linda, that there's certain tiers, especially African American women of color, how hard we have to fight to raise money versus the male and the other counterparts. That's why I said the way I say.
I hear you, and
I'm saying it from a different lens.
And
And it's harder, it gets harder and harder each year for people of color to raise money.
So here's my question. So because those are valid points. Those are valid points. Michael, if you remember when we had that gathering of Black folk in the Lehigh Valley at Union Baptist Church, and I gave the talk at the end. I was the last speaker, and I talked about voter turnout and the number of Black voters and the number of turnout and how the mayor's office was won with just 20% of the registered voters. And I laid out a strategy of everything that we need to do. And people was like, yeah, they was clapping. And then my last slide said, and we need a political financial war chest. You ain't hear nothing from those 500
not a pin drop.
It happened, and it does happen. I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, I'll take whatever someone gives me, but then I need to then engage that individual, thank that individual, because then they'll open up their purses again and again and again. What I am saying is that we, as individuals, the people on this call, if you're really about this, then we need to start a fund to fund it. Don't just talk about it. Let's do it.
So here's my question. And I gave that example to kind of lead to this point, right? Oftentimes folks don't give because we don't connect the dots between the challenges and the issues. See, we're political wonks. We eat, sleep this stuff, right? Yeah. Every damn thing. They can't connect the dots between what they want to happen in their kid's school and in their neighborhood with policy that's unfolded on the local level. So the education is more about, because most people think national, right? All this national. But again, how do we help people to understand the policy solution to the challenges that you face and the fact that those policy solutions are going to be delivered on the local level? And that's why it's important for you to support these candidates.
It was spoken to. It was spoken to. They said education, start with the kids. We got to get in the schools and we got to get back out on the streets and canvass and educate. And in the churches, meet with the pastors, talk to the pastors and tell them that your congregation is in dire straits, because if this happened, this is what's going to happen to you. You're not going to get your tithes.
You're not going to get. And I
People
also
are
think
not going to come to church. They're sick and tired of politicians showing up at church just
for
to
the
get
Black
elected.
vote. Yep.
So
just like
we need to change the way we communicate. We need to educate ourselves first and then educate our communities and our families. And we have to start somewhere. I'm never going to give up. I started a PAC for minority women, but I can't, I mean, some people give, but I give all my money out to the candidates, and everybody on here can honestly say that I have given to them in my little sparse little teeny weeny pack. I try to give it to as many people as possible, but to collect and give, some of the people I gave to, I never gave to my pack, but I still gave because they were good candidates.
So we've got 8 minutes left.
I'm done.
One thing, Dave.
Can I just ask if we can
One,
put a question out there from the attendees? There's one question, and it's in line with what we've been discussing here about funding. It reads, what about designated funds for Black candidates? Individual candidates could apply, and counties that do not advance a representative number of Black candidates could access resources if they step up to the plate and recruit and support Black candidates to victory.
But the problem with that would be having those Black candidates that are courageous enough to say, I'm going to put myself out. I mean, we can say we'll do it, but I just know here, we don't have a lot of Black candidates that want to step up to the plate because it's a red county, because of the systemic racism that they're facing, or because, it's a money issue. So how do you really get that qualified candidate? Like, how can we message to get to them?
Yeah, but the ideal is, if I'm reading the question right, it's about creating a fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the first thing, that the creating the fund, and then that fund can then be utilized to support candidates. And I'm certain there'd be an assessment process, right? How all the proper due diligence and stuff. But how do folks feel about that as a viable ideal?
So if I may, I think that's a great idea. However, I heard, I think it was Ms. Parker talking about how many Black women have Louis Vuitton bags and red bottom shoes. I think that it has a lot to do with the culture, because as silly as it may sound to us, investment versus return. If people invest in Louis Vuitton bags and red bottom shoes, then their return is they feel that they have something that they can be proud of and something that makes them feel good. I think too many times, my sister is a former executive director of the Democratic Party, and we would have discussions all the time about politicos versus voting people and average people, because I had the opportunity to be an administrator within a school district as well as a legislative director. And my thing was always polling people, the average people, and saying sometimes politicos become too far removed from what it is the average person, particularly young people, are interested in knowing and having done. And so what may seemingly be enough from an elected official or a candidate is not enough in the eyesight of a person who is a voter or a potential voter. So I think that one of the things that needs to happen is the messaging, and in terms of changing the culture, because young people today, as I said before, are not party loyalists. Many of them don't know the history and the importance of voting. And if they don't see a certain percentage of return for their investment, even if their investment is just going out to register to vote and then getting up to vote, then they're not going to do it. And so I think it's unrealistic for us to continue to say that they should do this and they need to do that, because young people today aren't interested in what people have to say. They're interested in a return for whatever their investment happens to be.
How do we,
based on what
hold on. How do we better articulate or position that return for their engagement?
Based on what you just said, we're all too old on this platform. Like, we should literally be talking to the younger sister that's 33, that age demographic and below, and have them dictate to us. I can't talk to a person her age. I'm 52. So
But
it should be from those are the individuals, meaning for this group right here, we should be starting to do these listening tours to listen to that demographic of individuals, and they'll tell us, and then we just come. That's literally it, because they're sitting there telling us you can't have the Black Democratic or message talking about jobs. These people is making 6 or 7 figures on Instagram. How you gonna tell them to go to a 9 to 5 job when
Right.
that type of work development, as I call it, poverty pimping, type of platform no longer exists? So you can't be angry that there are so many gaps in this workforce when this population of individuals are telling you that they're working. You can't tell them how to work in your structure. They have their own. We know 4 years ago when we had the PUA, I could count 7 Maseratis in the hood of my district. Today, I can count one. So I'm telling you is the fact that they know how to make the money, and we can't dictate to them how they're supposed to get their money, because that's not the way that we're living right now. I agree with what she said. We're dinosaurs, and we on this platform need to embrace that we're dinosaur. If you don't have a person that's in that age demographic of that 7, really I'll say 14 on up to what we're saying 33, then you already have missed the mark, because they're sitting here telling us what is important to them.
And politics is not important to many of them, just a handful.
Exactly.
And once again, we aren't listening. The divide is too great. And although I've never been an elected official, I had no desire to be a candidate for any elected position. I did have the opportunity to be around my sister and listen to the types of things that were said from DC on down. And I do know that she worked very diligently to try to get the Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party, to fund different initiatives at the state level. And they did not feel it important enough to invest in trying to make sure that Black and brown voices were, number one, recognized, and number two, appreciated. And so if young people don't feel that they are recognized and appreciated, we will continue to get what we've been getting for the past decade, which is less and less engagement. And as someone said earlier on the call, the Democratic Party takes advantage of us. They don't act as if they appreciate us. They're not giving those viable candidates who have stepped up to the plate the type of support that they need and that they deserve. And to be perfectly honest, one point in time we wanted to say that people who aren't educated are the people who aren't voting. They don't recognize the importance of voting. That's not true any longer either, because I know several people, several attorneys, as a matter of fact, who are so turned off by the Democratic Party and their lack of engagement that they're talking about not voting at all. And so,
and this is what and this is why this conversation and the ongoing conversation from this platform, and Michael, I hope this isn't the only one. This is a series of conversations.
It's a series, yeah, sure.
It becomes so important. It becomes important because of the challenges that have just been articulated, right? Folks are running away from the party. Young people don't see value in the party. But us politicals and us old heads, we understand and recognize what the far-reaching implications are when we don't get engaged and get involved. When Black folk decided to stay home because they was mad at Bill and Hillary for what happened 25, 30 years ago, that's how Donald Trump won. And we got all the subsequent chaos as a result of that. And so we all know and understand that if that trend continues again, we're not just talking about policy implications. I believe we are really fundamentally talking about democracy. And that's, for me, Mike knows, I'm a political history. That's not hyperbole. And it's not just democracy that's at stake. It's this world order, Western liberal democracy, which there ain't nothing better than it. It ain't perfect, but ain't nothing else out there that's better than it. all that's going to become destabilized. And the world that they grow up in and the luxury they have of not being able, not having to be engaged because there's a context in which they've grown up in, all that might not be around 15 years from now. So the challenge for us as politicals, as old heads that are engaged, is how do we take this conversation and turn it into resolute, intentional, strategic engagement and find a way to get as many of those young people. We ain't gonna get them all, but as many of them as possible engaged in the Democratic Party. That's not perfect, but I tell you what, I'd rather have an imperfect Democratic Party than the other folk.
Yeah. Can I jump in, Paige? Hold on.
I would
Let me
like to
jump
hear.
in.
I would like to hear from Ms. Moffitt before we close this thing out. That would be very, very encouraging to me if I heard from Ms. Moffitt before we end this entire thing.
Well, that's because Denitra is the youngest. That's why you want to hear from her, just because and she is young. All right, now just to let you know, we will have a part 2. I put together a graphic and we'll try to get something together. It's supposed to be on the 25th of February. That's the date that I chose. We'll send invitations out to everybody. I really want to thank everybody for appearing and being so robust. I want to thank the opportunity for everybody who actually spoke. I'd also like to acknowledge Lisa Rhodes, our former chair, and if she could say a few words before Denitra.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This has definitely been a robust conversation that warrants to be continued. But one of the things that I'll just add very quickly is in the resolution that we submitted as a caucus, people don't understand that once it's actually submitted and accepted, that it is part of the rules and regulations of the Democratic Party. And so if we want to do something that we could do immediately, almost everything that was part of the topic of conversation tonight is included in that resolution. And when it comes down to holding the Democratic Party accountable for supporting viable Black candidates, for having balance when it comes down to hiring employees of the Democratic Party and so forth. And so we can hold them accountable to everything that's in.
Have you been listening to that panel? It's horrible. I had to turn my camera and sound off.
I'm sorry. I can't see who that is. Michael, I don't know if you know who is.
I don't have
the mic on. But whoever it is obviously did not agree with the panelists were saying. But I think that accountability is key. And one of the things that is also key that Rep. Parker said is messaging, because we know what the messaging should be. We know what our messages, have been and continue to be to our respective communities. However, people are looking for the Democratic Party to deliver a powerful message that resonates with us. I'm not going to say them, I'm going to say with us. Because one of the things that people have always asked me is, well, what's the message? And that's interesting. These are people who aren't even in politics. People want to know what's the message. And you know why they really want to hear it now? Is because you have someone like 45 who is a loudmouth and a bully who will stand up knowing things are incorrect and what he's saying, but they will back him and they will believe in the lies that they speak when we are always trying to get along and be, docile or whatever. People are looking for real leadership now, nationally, not just here in Pennsylvania, but nationally. And as my sister said, I spoke about this to the second person in charge and said, what are we going to do? Because if not, I am so nervous about this upcoming election more than any other election in my lifetime. And so it's a real thing. And people need to also understand, because I wrote about this, that if 45, and it's not an if, when he becomes the nominee, you do know he can run from jail. He can and he will, if that ever happened. And he would actually not be the first. There was only one other person. And guess what state he was from? Pennsylvania. So this is a real thing and a real that we have to do. And I'm gonna leave with this. Everything that was said tonight is everything was critical and correct. But the first thing we have to do is come together. Because as the former chair of the Black Caucus, I can tell you, and thank you for all for making me the chair emeritus, we were not cohesive. Only every now and then, and only select few, people always look to have a title, and then they would get the title and still not do anything with it. People wanted to be out front. If they couldn't have their way, then they didn't want to participate. We fought with amongst ourselves to a point where it was almost that the Black Caucus was non-existent, and that was from within. So I would like to leave on the positive note of we need to bring more people into the caucus who actually want to do work and not seek titles or self promotion and do and grandstand. No, it's about doing the work and getting more people involved and making a dent. And money is a factor because money does talk. And so, but the problem is in the Black community, we don't support our own candidates. And like my sister said, they're looking for the return, because a lot of people say, I never see politicians do anything. They never help anybody. Well, we have to also do a better job of promoting our Black candidates and elected officials that do actually do stuff. And they have to do a better job of communicating the impact that they are having in our respective communities, because that's another missing link. You know, I have to go around and say to people, well, this person actually did this legislation and it's impacting you in this way. But the average voter doesn't know that information. So I'm going to step back and digress and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I cannot wait to be part of, whether in the audience or a panelist, of the next discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
We will have the youngest of our cohort.
So I like how Ms. Parker talked about messaging to younger people, because myself included. 30, I would say 35 and under, we have a problem with the messaging from the Democratic Party. Because like she said, we don't know what the message is, but also you do have people like 45 and his Republican cohorts who make it their mission to go after the Black vote because they know how powerful the Black vote is. And civics is not being taught like it used to be. I know I'm young, but I was taught civics in high school. And my teenage son, you know, he's only 13, but we have had to have those tough conversations about Trump and about what would happen, you know, if he becomes nominee again, if he becomes president. So as much as these conversations are uncomfortable, we have to have them not just with our Black counterparts, but the white counterparts, because they're looking to us to see what we're gonna do because they know how powerful our vote is. And just the other week or the other month, I'm sure everybody know who Dr. Umar is. He was here in Williamsport and he told a group of Black people not to vote. You should vote. You should withhold your vote. But in the same breath, he let it be known that so many of us Black people need to go talk to Donald Trump and see what he can do for the Black vote. So you have people who look like us and have a platform that are putting out this very dangerous rhetoric in an election year, and young people who are not as politically inclined gobble it up. They eat it up because if Dr. Umar is saying this, if Snoop Dogg is saying this, if Waka Flocka is saying this, then they must know something I don't know. So we really have to hone in on messaging for one, but also meeting voters where they are. Because I had a lady tell me when I was campaigning last year, no other candidate had came to her side of town because she couldn't write them a check. I was the first candidate that came over there. And it's the side of town on the other side of the tracks where you would think we would be, but it was a diverse selection of people who were in that socioeconomic hit part of Williamsport that the sidewalks were not paved, the roads were not paved. So candidates didn't want to walk over there. And to see this young Black girl walking over there with her 2-year-old in a stroller, you know, going to collect signatures, going to knock on doors, it meant something to them. But they only see people when it's time for a signature. And we ourselves as Black people, you know, I feel like we give the hardest criticism to our other people, to each other, more than the other counterpart should. And it is very hurtful and it's harmful to us because why is it you don't like me? Or why is it you feel like, you know, your criticism of me is so harder than it comes from other people? So I can just speak from my perspective. And I think either Miss Rose or Miss Fields made the comment about Mississippi. I'm here to tell you, I have experienced more racism here than I did in Mississippi. Born and raised in Mississippi, you know, went to college there, everything. The amount of racism I have experienced here doesn't carry weight to Mississippi when our state flag for 30 years was the Confederate flag. So when I hear people talk about that says a lot to me. My husband's the same way. He's 36. He born and raised in Jackson. We talk about the racism here as a vet. I've been in other countries where they don't have a democracy. And to know that our democracy has not only been attacked on January 6th, but is also still at risk to this day, it's scary. I wore a uniform for 10 years fighting for this country. My dad and my mom integrated schools back home when they were, you know, my kids' age. So I come from a line of activists and advocates. So to have my mom tell me she had more rights than I did when she was my age or younger, it is hurtful to us younger people to know that the Democratic Party in so many ways has really left us out to rot in so, you know, in retrospect. So we have to do better collectively, but also work together. When we work together, we're a force. But we have to do it here first and try to take the state over by storm. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to really take time and some cohesion to get it done. That's just my take as the youngest person here on the call, like Mr. Jones said.
Okay, can I jump in real quick? I wanted to
jump in and close out.
Yeah, sure. I want to thank everybody for participating in the process. We had a very robust conversation. We didn't anticipate it was going to take this long. But at the same time, I want to thank David Jones and just let you know some positive things that we've done. Dave Jones actually was a commissioner and actually was working with the NITRA, actually working with other of our commissioner candidates to demonstrate and to talk about the reals of being a commissioner and running for office. So I really want to thank him because we need to do more of this, finding more people like David that will come out and say, you're interested in being a state rep, what's the long-term plan? You're interested in being a congressperson, what's the long-term plan? These are all things that we need to do by working together. So I really want to thank David so much for doing a great job in terms of facilitating this. And I'm going to invite everybody back to our next discussion and we'll talk about solutions and what can be done. But I want to thank everybody so much, and thank you so much, Dave.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you. It was an honor. We got it all out our chest. We got it all out. Now we can kind of move on with solutions. I'll see you guys at the next one. Thank you all.